Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It's Mr. Kirk here again with another lecture that is brought to you by me. Our central question that we have been working on the last few days has been, what is the structure of the national government as set out in the U.S. Constitution? We are going to be specifically looking at the legislative branch today. Okay? Now, to get started, the legislative branch has another name. It's known as Congress. Okay? I'm going to also put an underline under legislative branch because that's what we're talking about. Specifically today, I want to talk about what are the jobs of the legislative branch. And then we're going to move into how do they actually make laws. So the legislative branch, as far as we're concerned, has 6 jobs given to them by the U.S. Constitution. Remember, Article 1. The legislative branch makes the laws of our nation. It does this through a long and involved process that we're going to learn about in just a minute. So make sure that you have make laws. Okay. For our second job of the legislative branch, they approve the budget. I said annual budget because Congress deals with the budget once a year, basically. A lot of times when this happens, they never can make up their mind, and they're like, oh gosh, the government's going to shut down. And every once in a while it happens. But that budget and those things have to be approved by the legislative branch. The third job of the legislative branch is confirming presidential appointments. This basically means anybody appointed by the president has to be approved by Congress, specifically the U.S. Senate. So if the president appoints a Supreme Court justice, or if the president appoints a executive officer, an ambassador to another country, or some important ones would be the actual president's cabinet members, his advisors or her advisors. Those all have to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Next, they raise revenue through taxes. A fifth job is regulating interstate and foreign trade, which means trade with other countries. That's foreign. Foreign means other countries. And interstate means trading with other states. Like if I have a company in Virginia and I trade with a company in California, those laws over our businesses would be written by the federal government and the legislative branch. The final one is a big one, and everyone usually gets this one right on the test, and that's declare war. Only the legislative branch can declare war. And quick fact, Congress has not declared war since World War II. So I guess all those wars like Korea and Vietnam and the Iraq and Afghanistan war never happened. We know that's not true. But Congress has never formally declared war. They've given some powers to the president as far as controlling the military, and so technically they would be known as conflicts. Let's move on. The next part I'd like to talk about is some vocabulary words within this slide, specifically the words budget and revenue. What's the common thing between budget and revenue? Theme music from Jeopardy is playing right now. No, it's not. But they both have to do with government spending and money. Okay? All right, let's move on. All right, so those are some of the jobs of the legislative branch. Let me erase my marks here. Okay, and let's skip this. All right. Our second part of the lesson is called the lawmaking process. All right. Now, the lawmaking process is one of the actual inner workings of Congress. It's the one they'll want you to know for your SOL test. And we are looking at how and why Congress makes laws. So let's get started. So how does Congress make laws? Well, first, officials are elected. They serve in the national legislature. That's Congress. And they make laws. That's it. It's a lot more complicated than that, but we're going to get into that in the next slide. Now, what branch of government passes laws is an easy one. Obviously, it's the legislative branch, so national laws are made by Congress in the legislative branch. I don't want you to worry about the bottom, but the main way as citizens we can participate in what's called the policymaking or lawmaking process is by direct participation. And we can do this by voting. We could run for office and try to become a senator or congressman or woman ourselves. Or you could protest. You could write a letter to the editor. You could write a letter or an email to your congressman or your U.S. senator. All of these are participating in the policymaking process. But let's actually get into how they create laws, or how is a law made in America. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you all of it because this is so important, but I want you to realize, and I'm going to get me a little pencil, I'm drawing an arrow going this direction for a specific reason, because this is the order of events. I'm going to put a kind of an arrow at the bottom, or excuse me, left corner of each box, and this shows the process. So our first step of how a bill becomes a law, and by the way, a bill, this word right here, a bill is what a proposed law is called. Before it's a law, it's called a bill. Hint, hint, vocabulary. So a bill is introduced in both houses, in the Senate and the House of Representatives. Now, it doesn't happen at the same time. If the House starts a bill, it goes through the process in the House and then goes to the Senate. And then if the Senate starts a bill, again, it goes through this process and goes back to the House. I know that's a little confusing. I'm going to try to draw it out for you in just a minute. But let's do abbreviated steps of how this process works first. Step one, a bill's introduced. That means it's written and they present it. They put it on the calendar. Step two, the bill is worked in committee. And by the way, working in committee is the same thing as editing the bill. In the Senate and in the House of Representatives, right, they edit the bill in committee. They would have standing committees over different things: the armed services, the economy, agriculture, drug policy, the medicines, and healthcare. They're going to be divided into categories like that, and there'll be standing committees of, X number of members of the House or the Senate, depending on which one we're talking about. And in those committees, they would debate and revise and get the bill the way they think it should be presented. Step three, by the way, is debating the bill on the floor of each house. So let's look at the first three steps. Step one, bills introduced. Step two, it's worked in committee, which is editing it. Step three is debating the bill on the floor of the House or the Senate. And the debate is like an argument, okay? When you think of a debate as an argument, or what we can call a formal discussion. Now, I'm not very good writing with my mouse on the computer, but a debate is like a formal argument. So we're going to write argue above it. Step four is voting on the bill, and that's done on both houses of Congress. Remember, one at a time. We're going to talk about that in a minute. That's an important word because if they don't vote on the bill, it dies. And to win, they have to have a majority. The final step is the bill is sent to the president to be signed into law, but if the president does not want to sign it, the president can veto the bill. If he vetoes it, he doesn't sign it, now all of this was done for nothing. Okay? So I'm going to quickly try to explain the process of this, and then we're going to try to see if we can understand. Now, if the bill started in the Senate, and I'm going to use green, it would go through this process. It's in the Senate. It's edited or worked in committee in the Senate. They debate the bill on the floor of the Senate, and they vote on the bill on the floor of the Senate. Now, it has to go all the way back where now the House of Representatives would see the bill. This is the word right here. So now that the House has the bill, they work the bill in committee. They go debate the bill on the floor of the House. They then vote on the bill on the floor of the House. And if the bill matches what happened in the Senate, that bill can now go to the president. If the president signs it, it's now a law. If he vetoes it, it's not. But if he vetoes it, it can do this. It can go all the way back here where they can start the whole process over again, or they can try to override a presidential veto. All of the veto, the signing of laws, and the overriding of a presidential veto are all parts of checks and balances. Are there any questions? If they are, shoot me an email. If they're not, we're going to move on. Now, this slide right here shows another graphic of how a bill becomes law, but this one's a lot more complicated. See, the bill is introduced in Congress, referred to committee, and then if one house approves the bill, it has to go to the other one, and then it can go back to the other one, and just do a big circle here. Now, if both houses approve the bill, it can go to the president, where he signs it, it becomes a law over to the left, or he doesn't sign it, then it goes over here. It's vetoed and can go back here where they can override it. Okay? Now, when it's in this orange area in Congress, right, whether it's being debated in committee, whatever, a bill can be rejected. Once a bill is rejected, it's dead. It doesn't exist anymore. Okay? This is a very simplistic way to look at it, and it's still complicated. So if you have any questions, shoot me an email. But we're going to move on. This is our final slide over the lawmaking process, and then I have a little example thing I'd like to do. Mainly, I want you to know, and you can look at the bold words on this slide, that Congress writes laws in response to problems and issues. I also want you to know that as an individual citizen of the United States, you can help shape legislation, and so does interest groups. So individuals and interest groups shape legislation. They do this by getting in contact with the people in Congress. I also want you to know that the formal powers of Congress are limited by the Constitution. They can only do certain things. By the way, you ever see the word limit? What's that? Oh, checks and balances. Limits means checks and balances. If you ever see that word, they're probably talking about checks and balances if you're in a civics class. But let's move on to our example because notes are over. Yay. All right. So I want you to stop and think. I'm going to read a little scenario to you, then we're going to talk about it, okay? Move myself over here. Make myself a little bigger. There we go. So Mr. Kirk is very mad that he teaches in an urban school with many minority students. Many of his students do not have nice books. There's no good desks. The building's old and decrepit. Very little technology or clean bathrooms or even enough certified teachers. And he's had it. It makes me mad. Now, one day, I go to the local chapter of the NAACP. That's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. It's a civil rights organization that's been around for a long time. You should have learned about it in 6th grade. Anyway, I complained to them because they agree with me, they go to Washington, D.C. to meet with our representatives to talk to them about what can we do to make this better, to make the schools better in urban areas. Well, thankfully, the representative agrees with Mr. Kirk and the NAACP because, well, they're a major political supporter of them, so they want to make them happy. And thousands of other teachers across the state agree with me also. So the senator we spoke to decides it's time to make a change, and he writes a new bill to help schools in an urban setting. And then it would go through that lawmaking process off after that. All right. So I'm going to just put my face over the graphic. So tell me this. What is the first step for the representative once he gets to Washington to create a new law? What happens first? Well, I'll tell you. He introduces the bill, whether that's in the House or the Senate. Is it likely that the representative will get a new law within 1 week? Will I have my new law in 7 days? Why or why not? No. Making laws is very long, very complex with many, many steps. And I wanted to bring this up because why do you think they made it so hard to pass a new law? Because nobody wanted any crazy laws. So they made the process very difficult, very complex. So only hopefully the good laws would pass. The end. And if you want to, go to YouTube, watch Schoolhouse Rock. I'm Just a Bill. Mine doesn't work anymore. Anyway, it was good. I'm glad you all watched my presentation on the legislative branch and the lawmaking process. And remember, if you have any questions, shoot me an email. Take care, guys. See you next time.